For decades, Topps set the gold standard for baseball cards, with timeless designs and iconic photography. Some years the cards were elegant and minimalist, and other years they were bold and colorful. But they always had that special Topps cool factor. Masterclass after masterclass in sports card aesthetics, creating incredible pieces of memorabilia. That is, until 1990. What in the world went wrong here? 1990 Topps is best known for Frank Thomas's rookie card and, of course, the no name on front error version of that card. But when it comes to the overall set, of the many adjectives people have used to describe it, none of them have been good. But what if I told you that there's a secret history to this set? The design doesn't seem to fit with Topps' history and pattern until you start digging into the details. Well, we've done the digging, and there's quite a story behind this set of cards. It involves superheroes, a 19th century printing process, Hollywood blockbuster movies, and, of course, a little Topps nostalgia. So sit back and relax. Time to hear about the secret history of 1990 Topps. 1990 Topps baseball cards first hit retailers in March of 1990. This was typical for Topps, getting product on store shelves just in time for the start of the baseball season. This means just about all of the work, including design, photography, printing, and packaging, happened during 1989. The first thing Topps did was turn back the clock on their own history to draw inspiration from their past designs, just as they'd done numerous times before. In 1980, Topps released an iconic set featuring team names on pennants, as you can see here for Mets first baseman Ed Kranepool. This design was a direct homage to their set from 15 years earlier, the 1965 issue, which also featured team names on pennants. In 1986, Topps decided to release a set of black-bordered cards. Fans had been clamoring for this design to come back ever since it had been featured in the 1971 set. Unfortunately, even with the 15-year gap in this case, the quality between these two sets didn't improve much in terms of both chipping and overall centering. These problems are painfully apparent anytime black borders are used on cards. So in 1990, Topps released the set we're here to talk about. Here's Frank White, the great second baseman who spent his entire career with the Royals. The first thing just about everyone noticed in 1990 were the bright blocks of colors on these cards. There was a clear connection once again to a Topps set from 15 years prior, this time the 1975 set. That earlier set was known for, you guessed it, bright blocks of color. Looking at these two Frank White cards side by side, there is no denying that Topps once again turned back its own clock for design inspiration. Obviously, though, there's a lot more going on with 1990 Topps than just blocks of color, so we need to keep digging to find the inspiration for the other design elements. Let's think about what was going on in 1989. In June of that year, Tim Burton's Batman was released. This was the first modern superhero movie and the progenitor of all the DC and Marvel films that have come out since. It was a big deal. Remember that up until this point, the Batman that most people knew was either this guy from the comic books or this guy from the 1960s TV show. The 1989 Batman film starred Michael Keaton, Kim Basinger, and Jack Nicholson. It was dark and stylish and, like I mentioned, kicked off a new direction for superhero films. Naturally, the movie had merchandise tie-ins, including 2 series of trading cards released at the same time as the film. Guess who produced these cards? Topps, of course. Cards were designed and created in 1988 following filming of the movie and were ultimately sold in wax wrappers just like baseball cards. Let's take a look at the back of this Vicky Vale card. Does that back look familiar to you? Well, here's Rickey Henderson's record breaker card from the 1990 Topps set, and here's the back of that card. Designed about 6 months after the Batman cards, Topps obviously reused the same yellow cardstock and the same style and color of ink printing. So that's one more piece of the puzzle solved. Now, right around the time the Batman film came out and when Topps was working on the 1990 baseball card design, there was a major shift in the comic book industry. Here's a Batman cover done by Todd McFarlane, number 423, which came out in September of 1988. And here's McFarlane's cover for The Amazing Spider-Man, number 312, from February of that same year. Notice the dynamic art style and bold colors. This started to become a major movement in comic books right at that time. In fact, take a look at the cover of The Uncanny X-Men issue 244, released January 17, 1989. The cover art by Mark Silvestri has a color palette and style that matches 1990 Topps nearly perfectly. Orange, blue, green, purple, yellow, and red. Let's take a closer look at the Frank Thomas card, here showing just the red on that card. There's a solid red inner border, but look at that outer border. It's actually a checkerboard pattern of dots, and the spacing of the dots changes. If we look at the original card with all the colors, we see that Topps produced color gradients by varying the size and spacing of main colors from their chosen palette, as opposed to actually printing different colors in different locations. Every single 1990 Topps card is done this way. In this Greg Maddux example, you can see blue dots on a white background, with the variation in density creating the appearance of a gradient, but it's just dots. Does this remind you of anything? How about this old Batman comic we saw earlier? Look at the part of his face not covered by his mask. It looks exactly like the Frank Thomas border. Why, in 1990, did Topps design something that already looked 40 years old? To uncover that answer, we're going to have to dig even further back, all the way back to the 1800s. Comic books. You've almost certainly seen images like this, where patterns of dots were used to fill in areas of color. This technique dates all the way back to the 1870s, when it was invented by a guy named Benjamin Day. And this style is now known widely as Ben Day dots. Day invented this process for a very specific reason, to produce color images printed on paper without having to use a lot of ink. Because pigment was prohibitively expensive back then, it was too costly to print lots of copies of something unless it could be done with very little ink. Day's process made use of plates that allowed for the precise transfer of dots of ink instead of covering entire areas of the page with ink. Look, for example, at this Tarzan comic. Other than the black outlines and writing, every bit of color on this page is made from dots. The 1960s witnessed the emergence of the pop art movement, an era where Ben Day dots became a defining aesthetic. A central figure in this movement was Roy Lichtenstein. He's a controversial figure, but I won't try to adjudicate his career here. Nevertheless, his influence is undeniable, as throughout the 1960s and into the 1970s, dot-based techniques evolved from an industrial cost-saving technique into actual art. By the 1980s, dots were fully an art form, a creative choice by the artist. When Topps chose to incorporate them into its 1990 baseball card set, it was absolutely an homage to pop art, to Ben Day, to Roy Lichtenstein, and many other artists responsible for a huge movement in art culture. So, what ties all these ideas together? We've got bold blocks of color, we've got homage to dot-based art, we've got color palettes inspired by then-current comic books. Was Topps working on anything else like this at the time? You betcha. The thing that ties them all together is Dick Tracy? Oh yeah, Dick Tracy. Dick Tracy started as a newspaper comic strip in 1931, invented, written, and drawn by Chester Gould. The character first got his own comic book in 1937, and since then the story's been adapted into numerous books, radio shows, TV shows, both animated and live action, as well as films and film serials. There have been many Dick Tracy comic books over the years, including a brand new version that started in 2024. And there's been tons of tie-in merchandise, including action figures, models, video games, and trading cards. Yes, during 1989, Topps made a set of Dick Tracy trading cards, starting work in advance of the production of a live-action movie that was ultimately released in 1990. That film starred Warren Beatty, Madonna, and Al Pacino. It didn't do particularly well, getting mediocre reviews and also fairly mediocre box office receipts. Disney didn't lose money on the movie, but it grossed less than half of the $400 million Batman had done the year prior. Now, I'm not saying Dick Tracy was a direct inspiration for 1990 Topps, but the similarities are there. We've got a big block of color at the top and another big block at the bottom. We've got a strong accent color outlined in black in the middle of the frame. And of course, we've got strong primary colors everywhere without any real gradients. Considering Dick Tracy's history, combining comic books, Ben-Day dots, and strong colors, and the fact that Topps was right in the middle of making a trading card series for the film, this is what was on their mind when they were brainstorming the 1990 Topps design. In the end, this baseball card set exists right at the center of overlapping art movements. It pays homage to 100 years of color printing, while also drawing heavily from the world of classic comic books. But we also saw that it was inspired by a new generation of dynamic comics and movies that started just as the 1980s were coming to a close. Yes, 1990 Topps is of its time, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. I still don't think this is a nice looking set of cards, but Topps still did an amazing job. They took a look at the world of pop art and they pulled it all together into one product. Unlike any other Topps product before or since, 1990 Topps captures the art world of its day, and I think that's awesome. And I should mention that not all the cards from this set are ugly. Here are a few star cards that have lovely colors and good photos and would look good in anybody's collection. Let me know two things in the comments. What's the one adjective you would use to describe the 1990 Topps design? And where does it rank for you in your list of favorite baseball card sets? As always, thanks for watching. Please hit like on this video, subscribe for more, and have a great day. See you soon.